Hello, it's Charlie Wilmoth. I'm at 6 Heather Way. You hear me?
Yes, just fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we moved into our home, 6 Heather Way, in um, 2006. So we've been in this neighborhood for 14 years, overlooking this park. I walk by that park every single day, a couple times a day with the dog. Our dining room looks into the park. I can see kids playing there, people playing golf. I've seen, kids probably what they shouldn't have been doing was sleeping out in that park. Middle school kids that put a little tent in there. I've been participating in the Easter egg hunt, the fall picnic. We've volunteered for that. I see people out there with their dogs. We've taken our dog out there. My kids were 10, 6, and 3 when we moved in here. The value of having that park was phenomenal and what attracted to us to this neighborhood. I do not question the problem. I question the solution. So our home that we originally bought over on Molino, we bought for $550,000. Today, Zillow says that's a $2.2 million house. I do not question the affordable housing issue. I question the solution. My kids, I want to be able to move here too. So the key issue is, I think affordable housing is a laudable goal, but the way you're trying to go about it is wrongheaded. So it's to steal a jewel, a treasure of the community forever that really does hold this heart of this community together, as you've seen with 100 plus people out here. The reality is I listened to the ADU issue, and the only approving 12 ADUs a year. That's 1 per month. If you just added 2 a month, you would create 48 new units over 2 years. I'll tell you, with what you're going to hit with litigation and everything on this thing, you'll never get a property done in 2 years here. You could hire somebody at City Hall to fast track those permits and get done in 2 years what you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Bowden. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, I'm Bowden. I'm 10 and go to Edna McGuire. I live on Heather. We use the park all the time, mainly for playing soccer in our field. But sometimes, like last night, we have Nerf gun fights down there. It's really fun. We don't use the playground anymore. What I like most about the park is the grassy area and the trees around it. It's a really special place, and there isn't anything quite like it in Mill Valley. We used to have picnics and jumpy houses before COVID. We had this one super challenging jumpy house, and I mastered it. We also had taco trucks. I had birthday parties on the field with a magician. My brother had several parties down there with magicians and tie-dyeing. When I think about it, we used to spend a lot of time with our friends on the field. Now we can't. Now we spend so much time on the computer instead of hanging out. I can't wait for COVID to end. Luckily, we have this park so near our house and I can go down with my brother whenever I want. By the way, we don't like playing in the golf course. Thank you.
Bowden, you're a very well-spoken young man. Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Joe Priest. I will go ahead and unmute you if you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Joe Price. I live at 21 Sheridan Court. Our park is a treasure that should be kept. Mill Valley should have affordable housing. They're not mutually exclusive. I began my research by asking, what are Mill Valley's affordable housing goals? With Danielle's help, I found that Mill Valley needs to create 129 affordable housing units between 2014 and 2022. That number was given to us by the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Process, or RHNA. Whether 129 is the morally correct number is another important discussion. But today, the legal number is 129. Are we on track? According to Mill Valley's housing reports, we've already built 99 affordable units through 2019, around 16 per year. 13 of those are accessory dwelling units, ADUs, built and rented out by homeowners at no cost to the city. If fellow citizens simply continue at that same rate, we'll build 149 units, exceeding our target of 129. And we can do even better. California has brand new laws that make it much easier to build ADUs. So let's assume an easily attainable 20 ADUs per year, 7 more per year than now. That means 169 units by 2022, which is 40 units beyond and 30% beyond our RENA requirement. Remember, no cost to the city. ADU production can scale up much more quickly and easily provide more units than an affordable housing development. Again, no cost to the city. From this, it is obvious that we can build lots of affordable housing and keep our parks.
Okay, Joe, your time has expired. Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Michael Freemer. I'll go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm
Okay,
Ben.
Michael, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I am Ben. I am 8 years old and I'm in third grade. I live in the Scott Highlands. It's the best place to live. Do you want to know why? Because I live near my favorite place. I get to go down to the park whenever I want. I used to meet my friends down there, but now I just go down there on my own. It's a safe place to hang out in. It's the only place my mom lets me go by myself. I love to run around in the grassy field. I learned how to play baseball with my dad there. I couldn't believe what it would feel like if the park were turned into houses. It's really important to me that you save our park.
Okay, Ben, is that it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have David Steinhardt. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay. My name is David Steinhardt, and I live with my wife, Michelle, at 403 Vista Linda Drive, really right next door to the space that's being talked about. You know, first of all, I can't tell from Danielle's summary whether the recommendations have been revised to take us off the list as a primary sales strategy, or if it's sort of back in the pack for further review. So it would help to know that, but I'm going to proceed as if it's still a priority on the recommendation list. So I support the goal of affordable housing expansion, but like others, take issue with how the committee has singled out our neighborhood park as the #1 leveraging strategy to get there. The main test that was applied in the report was that we are underutilized, and I hope you're learning from the input today that that is an ill-founded conclusion. And there are other undeveloped issues here that really need to be explored. No cost benefit analysis of the dollars raised versus the project cost. In fact, there's no project. And no mention of how we use and rely on this space for fire safety and disaster response. And then this critical question, why is the leveraging strategy of first choice one that kills a neighborhood park? Really, the burden of expanding affordable housing should be spread equally across the citizens of the city, not targeted to one neighborhood. And I will help you campaign for a parcel tax on this if it would stop the takeaway of our park and open space. And finally, I think the sell a park approach is fundamentally divisive across the whole Mill Valley community. One that pits neighborhood against neighborhood, citizen against citizen, and park against park. And this is not how this should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Don Jenkins. If you could please state your name and address for the record. I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah, Don Jennings, Mid Hill Drive in Mill Valley. I'm assuming you can hear me?
Yes.
Correct. Great. First of all, let me say I really appreciate Joe's comments a minute ago. He really documented some things with some facts that are lacking from this overall process. And while I strongly agree with the objective of increasing affordable housing and diversity in Mill Valley, I'm strongly opposed to ineffective and inefficient government. And it appears this process appears to be just that. And that's from the discussion earlier, listening to Gregory and others about, what is the money going to be spent on? We don't know that. And that's a critical aspect. In the real world, in business, you define a project with real goals and objectives. That's clearly not done here. You're selling this to the public with misleading information. Just like tonight, you obviously all got together and said, we're not going to sell the property, we're going to leverage it because that sounds better. It's political correctness, and frankly, in my opinion, it's BS. Just tell the public what you're going to do. And get on board with a real project. What you should be bringing to the public is, we've got 3 options here. We can build X units for X cost. We will sell them at this price or rent them at this price. And here's what we're going to, some possibilities on how to get there. Instead, you're just, trying to sell this to the public to raise money in abstract based upon political correctness and platitudes. And I think you are abrogating your physical and civic responsibility by doing such. If you really want to, be a real manager, be a real boss of the city, you need to actually belly up to the bar, show us the numbers, tell us what's really going to happen so we can hold you accountable to the numbers.
All right, Don, thank you. Next up, we have Mark Polite. If you could please state your name and address for the record. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee for your efforts, especially taking the time to include real estate experts, because we know that you are not experts in this field. And I think it's great that you brought along BAR and it's Mid-Pin Housing. These are real quality people. I've been in the business for 35 years. I know a little bit about it. Philosophically, you don't sell rare assets, period. Whether you're an individual, a city, an institution, a community, whatever you are, you don't sell rare assets. Parks are rare assets by definition. So I think that to spend any money of the trust fund to further explore these 2 sites is a waste of money. And if the committee votes to do that, I think that you should be held accountable for that. It's a waste of the housing trust fund money. I have no argument with the analysis. Diane did a great job analyzing it, winnowing it down, putting it through the sieve, as John McCauley called it. But the reality is, your votes should come down to, and city council votes should come down to one thing: the number of residents of the city of Mill Valley that are for this, and the number of the residents of the city of Mill Valley that are against this. Nothing else matters. If you have more people against it, that's where your vote is. The number 1 goal of the general plan is to protect and enhance natural beauty. You're not going to do it by getting rid of a park. I hope that's not a legacy you want to have, any one of you. You can do this a lot faster by working on the public safety building lot 1 and working on ADUs and working on acquisitions using Matt's numbers, $750 per unit. You could do it a lot faster and a lot cheaper by buying existing units and converting them to affordable units. So I'd like you to refocus on the public safety building and don't waste any money, any further, any time on this park or any other park. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Lawrence Litvik. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Thank you. Lawrence Litvak, 14 Mid Hill Drive in Mill Valley. We have a few points I'd like to make. First of all, I support the direction that the Housing Committee has taken. I think they're taking a thoughtful approach. I think there's been some mischaracterization of what they have presented to us in some of these comments. They said that they haven't said that they're going to sell this property before they have a more defined project. They're saying that they need to decide that this or another property is available to sell so they can put out an RFP to in fact develop those details, okay? So a lot of the comments are missing that. Secondly, one of the unique aspects of the area surrounding this proposed site to be sold is that it is 1.5 acres, actually 1 acre that's mainly used as what people are describing as the park, and then another 1/2 acre across the street that doesn't appear to have that same use. This is part of a 43.5 acre site of open space that adjoins all these houses. So we're talking about 3%. There is a lot of space in the golf course area that could be made available and improved for the community to mitigate the loss of the particular areas that we're talking about. I went to the site today, I toured it. There's a huge area between the 6th and 7th hole that's protected by lots of trees, flat area. It's many times the area that's going to be sold. So that's one possibility. Secondly, the golf course as a whole is very underutilized asset in the community right now. I don't know if people know this, but it's losing several $100,000 a year. About 50 people in normal times play on the golf course each day. Most are not from Mill Valley. So usage has been declining. So we should be looking at ways that we can make the golf course more accessible to the neighborhood. And the committee has already indicated that.
All right. Thank you, Lawrence, for your time has expired. Thank you for your comment. Next up, Yvonne Rojas. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, this is Neil Shaw, Yvonne Rojas's husband. I presume you can hear me. My wife and I are people of color. We live at 10 Tartan Road. Yvonne is Mexican-American and had to fight her father to be allowed to be the first person in her family to go to college. I'm a cancer researcher at UCSF, where 5 years ago I spearheaded the development of a program aimed to improve diversity in our physician scientist training programs. We have recruited 5 highly talented individuals from groups that are underrepresented and are very proud of that. So we wholeheartedly applaud efforts to improve diversity in our town and region. We also greatly enjoy the open spaces that are available for the public to enjoy, including the beloved park in question, which is a convenient 5-minute walk from our home and centrally located in the neighborhood. This park provides a much needed flat grassy area for recreational activities, as you've heard, and also provides a convenient place for periodic neighborhood gatherings that further bolster the sense of community in our neighborhood. The issue of lower housing density was brought up earlier, but bear in mind that we are adjacent to the golf course and to open space, trails, and so on that can't be built up. And so that really needs to be taken into perspective. As others have mentioned, once public land becomes privatized, it is gone from public use forever, and that needs to be bear it in mind. We believe that efforts aimed at improving diversity, equity, and inclusion will greatly benefit our entire community. We further believe that investments and sacrifices toward facilitating these changes should be equitably shared by the residents of Mill Valley and not shouldered primarily by a minority of the community. We therefore strongly encourage you to consider other means of raising revenues, such as through supplemental real estate and sales taxes or dedicated fundraising opportunities. Having the investment and support of the broader Mill Valley community would send a clear and powerful message as to our level of commitment. We understand the skepticism around the ability to rapidly raise funds based on the past, but we live in a transformational moment in our society, and we have an opportunity to capitalize. Lastly, in light of the fact that we are in a new pandemic reality that may be with us for years or even decades to come.
Thank you for your time, sir. Your time has expired. Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Alice Mead. Alice, I'm going to unmute you, and if you could please state your name and address for the record. Okay, Alice, it looks like we're having probably a little issue. I don't know if it's on your end or not, but I've
Can you hear me
went
now?
ahead. Yes, ma'am. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
We live at 4 Heather Way, and we support the development of low-income housing in Mill Valley, but we don't think that the costs of that development.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Alice, I'm going to bring you back on to see if I could get you to start that again. I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I apologize.
We support the development of low-income housing in Mill Valley, but we don't think the costs of that development should fall on one neighborhood through the sale of what is a precious community open space. And the other spaces that Danielle listed are really not feasible alternatives in the short term, and especially for families with young children. And it also seems wrong-headed to be seriously considering selling a community open space before we have identified an appropriate parcel in Mill Valley where low-income housing could be built. We moved to Mill Valley from San Francisco 27 years ago when our children were babies. And we chose the Scott Highlands neighborhood in large part because it had a community open space where our children could play with other neighborhood children without our having to pack them into a car and drive them to another playground or another field like we had to do in San Francisco. And all the activities that my other neighbors have described that take place on that field, those go a long way towards forging connections between neighbors that help build a strong community where people will look out for each other. And this kind of connectedness is increasingly missing in our modern world. So we ask that the city not sell our only community open space, but find other funding mechanisms that will spread the cost of affordable housing more fairly among the residents of Mill Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have John Palmer. John, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you please state your name and address for the record. John, are you there?
Hello. Yeah, I see. I had to manually unmute it. Yes, John Palmer, Scott Valley. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I would just like to agree with what Mark Polite and Dennis Fisco proposed regarding the property next to the public safety building. I think that's where you should be focusing. I agree with all the speakers who said selling parks is wrong. I think it's wrong-headed. It's short-sighted. Even making a list of parks you might even consider selling, I think, is a nod in the absolute wrong direction. I have a question for Matt Franklin, and you can either answer it now or address it in a different way. But I've appeared before the council on a number of occasions and suggested that the city impose a transfer tax, not a parcel tax, which would affect every parcel, but a transfer tax. And it's my understanding that a transfer tax would possibly require a vote of the city. But the reason I suggested a transfer tax is because those of us who've lived here a long time, and I've been here 50 years, when we bought our homes, years and years and years ago for a few $100,000, and now they're worth in 7 figures, most of that increase in value is attributable to inflation. Some of it maybe to the work we did in our homes. But people are a lot less inclined to object to a tax that only happens once in a lifetime and once when you sell the property, as opposed to a parcel tax or any other kind of tax. So I thought that a transfer tax would be the way to go. The city of San Francisco imposes them, city of LA imposes them, many cities impose transfer taxes. And the only other thing I'd like to say, one last thing, is that I'll really believe that you guys are 100% behind affordable housing when you outlaw non-owner occupied short-term rentals, which is another thing I've said before the city, before the county, before the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. If you return short-term rentals to the marketplace, you'll get a lot more housing, maybe not affordable housing, but but more of a housing stock than you can possibly create by all of the means that you're trying to create them. The last time I checked, there were 90-something short-term rentals. I'm talking about only non-owner occupied ones, not ones where people rent a room in their house.
Thank you for your comments, John. Your time has expired.
I'm done. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have Ashley Hartman. Ashley, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record. Okay, Ashley, looks like we've lost you there. I don't know if you're wanting to come back into, if you could raise your hand again, we could probably get you back in the queue.
I think you unmuted me. This is Tammy Edmondson.
Okay, let's see here. All right, Tammy, we'll go ahead and Ashley, if you can hang on, I can get you next. Tammy, if you can go ahead and state your name and your address for the record.
You got it. It's Tammy Edmondson, 6 Lillian Lane. I just want to thank the committee for taking a really serious look at a crucial issue in our community. I moved to Mill Valley in 1965, so I'm truly an old timer who's seen a lot of changes here. I can say I've seen a lot of my friends, my family, my neighbors forced out of Mill Valley because they can no longer afford to live here. We used to be a lovely artist community, and the artists have all moved away, including my blues musician brother. That breaks my heart. It broke my heart when my daughter's favorite teacher had to move and leave the Mill Valley school system because he could no longer afford to live here. But in this moment of racial awakening, when we've all really had our awareness raised about Mill Valley's history of racial exclusion, racially restricted covenants and the like that have led to the real segregation of our community, I think we have an extra burden to create affordable housing and remediate that really sad history that has damaged all of us in this community and made us a too homogenous community, more so than we ever wanted to be. So I urge you to do all of the things you're talking about. It will impact somebody's neighborhood. I live a half a block from an affordable housing complex on Linden Lane, and I can tell you they make fabulous neighbors. There's nothing to be afraid of. If you have a green space near your house and you have to give it up and have your egg roll on the golf course, I'm sorry for you, but there is a higher value. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to go back and see Ashley Hartman. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and ask if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, this is Roger Gold. Can you hear me for Ashley Hartman?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Roger Gold. The address is 6 Glen. I have the unique perspective of I'm right next to the field and the park. I've just moved into my home 2 weeks ago. So I bought the land in 2017. I've worked hard. I'm not a trust fund kid like a lot of people in Mill Valley. I bought this property, saved money to be able to develop it, and to learn that one of the reasons I'd lived in a rental unit up in the hills in Blythedale Canyon. I have young children that never had an open space to play in. One of the reasons I moved here is because of the park and the field. And I know that the Well-Intentioned Commission has heard people say how much they value the park, and you're trying to effectuate a larger social goal. But in this time that feels so undemocratic, I feel like our democracy is being torn away to find a bunch of well-commissioned or well-intentioned commissioners that want to take away a park to effectuate social change because of, and we all feel strongly that, we want Mill Valley to be more diverse. We feel bad that our local providers, it's difficult to live and work here. It is capricious to take a park from one community and say, hey, yeah, we think that's a good spot. This is the best use of our dollars. Oh, by the way, we're going to take this park here. Commissioner McCauley, you bought your house in 1984. I paid more in licensing taxes to build my house than you pay in annual property taxes, sir. It's just a fact. My time is up.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you for your comment, sir. Next up, we have Elaine Fisher. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Eileen Fisher. I live at 321 Vista Linda Drive. First, I want to thank John McCauley, Urban Carmel, the Planning Commission Department, and my neighbor, Matt Franklin, for your incredible work to make Mill Valley a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive city to live in and to be proud to live in. I live 400 yards from the said open field in Scott Highlands. I'd like to echo what Tammy Edmondson said and what Tay Franklin said. I have been heavily involved with racial social justice in Mill Valley for 4 years, and especially the past 4 months. I was recently selected to be on our city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. So I've learned a lot, especially about my own community, our history of segregation and racism, and that we live in the most racially segregated county in California. This segregation is felt deeply by our BIPOC community and our neighbors in Marin City. I have learned this firsthand. And because of this, I fully support efforts by our city to make Mill Valley more equitable and diverse and inclusive. A key component of which means the great necessity of building affordable housing. And if the sale of the field on my street is the most expedient way to get new affordable housing built, then I am in full support. I would be happy to be part of showing Mill Valley and Marin County and the greater Bay Area that a mostly white resident neighborhood in Mill Valley is okay with a sacrifice of this kind. A fundamental shift must take place in Mill Valley and Marin. And maybe we can be the first mostly white community in decades to make a sacrifice for greater equity, more diversity, and an overall better place to live. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Bernard Catalanito. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and your address for the record. Okay, Bernard, let's see if you can unmute there on your end, perhaps. All right, Bernard, I'm sending the request to go ahead and unmute. If you can, I'll give you another second or two here. If not, I can come back to you and we'll go to the next person. I'm thinking perhaps it's going to be on your end, if you can unmute yourself there. All right, Bernard, we'll get back to you here. We're going to go to the next person. That is Paul Chunglin. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and ask if you could please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Chilgen, 337 Vista Linda. Thank you to the City Housing Committee for their work and for allowing me to speak. My name is Paul Chilgen, and I have either been president or co-president of the Scott Highlands Neighborhood Association for over 10 years. I'm speaking about the proposed sale of the grass area of Scott Highlands Park for funds for affordable housing. I understand the urgent need to provide low-cost housing, but I feel the sale of this area would not be the best choice. Mill Valley is all about preservation of a small town feel, a healthy natural environment, and emphasis on open space. I've been told many times that our neighborhood is one of the top 2 or 3 most organized neighborhood associations in Mill Valley. Mill Valley has welcomed our organization and our participation in the greater Mill Valley environment. I've heard multiple times that city organizers wish that many more neighborhoods were as active and as organized as ours. Our neighborhood is a little bit unique in that it's all the houses at the split beyond of Buena Vista into Glen and Vista Linda with no outlets to either of these roads. We comprise about 130 homes. We have voluntary dues. We have 2 yearly organizational events that bring between 75 and 125 people together on the grassy area of the park. These events allow our residents to get to know each other and everyone else in the neighborhood who they would otherwise never meet. It's the glue that binds us together. I can say that after living here for 25 years, I would know very few people if it were not for the annual events. It's our twice-a-year neighborhood reconnection. Furthermore, there are multiple people who use the park daily with their kids and pets, as you've heard. Owing to its openness and large area, it's an easy place to congregate. And if we're lost, I do feel that there would be nothing else that would come close. It's always available in a sunny open space to meet. It has been very easy with this park as our meeting place to conduct many activities. Building houses on this area would totally change the neighborhood dynamic. I do believe our neighborhood association would fade. Precious open space would also be lost forever. I understand the need for more and less costly housing in Mill Valley. It sounds like there are a lot of ideas going around. However, I do want to understand that the loss of this grassy park would be at a large cost to the cohesion of our Scott Highlands Association. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we're going to go back and see if Bernard, I'm going to go ahead and ask to unmute to see if you've worked out any issues on your end here. Okay, Bernard, I'm going to give you a little bit more time. We're going to go through the next couple folks and see if we can come back to here a little bit later in the queue.
Members of the public, if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you look on the lower left-hand side of the screen, there's a mute button, and that's how you unmute yourself at the point that that Mark allows you to do that.
Thank you. Ryan Butin, I will go ahead and unmute you if you could please state your name and address for the record. Okay, Ryan, are you there?
Sorry about that. I didn't listen to the instructions of the unmute. Here I am. My name is Ryan Bunton, and I live at 6 Tartan Road in the Scott Highlands, which my wife and I recently purchased. So we're perhaps some of Mill Valley's newest residents. A decision which I'd stress was in large part driven by the family neighborhood vibe in this little corner of town and the close access to Scott Highland Park for our dog and growing family. I just wanted to quickly voice my support and praise for some of the comments which have already been made, specifically from many of my new neighbors, most of whom we've yet to even have the chance to meet, along with some of the creative thought leadership from Greg Hildebrand earlier, who provided some interesting ideas, which I think the commission should consider. But specifically, I wanted to just stress 2 points. First, open space, public open space, especially in flat, accessible areas, can't be replicated. If you sell it or you give it away, it's gone forever. Protecting those spaces should be, in my opinion, the priority. Second, while I am all for affordable low-income housing, I think like many others, the revenue for any and all related housing progress should, in my opinion, be shouldered by the entire community. And if you do some quick back of the envelope math for the projects which Matt Franklin previously outlined, you take 35 million and divide it by roughly 6,000 households, you get to $5,833, a cost which I believe would be likely approved and taken seriously by the city's residents. That being said, I'm only a resident here for 2 weeks. Finally, from a big picture perspective, away from the issue at hand, the biggest surprise to me as a new resident is that this topic is seemingly higher on the priority list per my cursory scan of the town's website than the safety of its citizens from an evacuation perspective, which in my mind should be a very high priority given the fire risk and fire danger that we all live amongst. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have, now only have one, it's not a full name, so Fredlin, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and allow you to speak. If you could please state your full name and your address for the record.
Hi, this is Katie Moore. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, Katie, please go ahead.
Hi, I live at 9 Tartan Road, a new neighbor to Ryan. I wanted to thank you for your time and thoughtfulness in this matter. You've clearly put a lot of care into this. Wanted to say, seems in listening to this that the city should plan its affordable housing projects before we raise funds for those projects. The proposed orders of things doesn't make sense. Second, I don't exaggerate when I say that the Scott Highlands Park is the heart of our neighborhood. As Mill Valley residents, you all can appreciate the joy this flat, sunny, grassy knoll gives us. The park is like Shangri-La to our 3 children, and we cannot imagine living here without it. Please don't take it away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the one, I've got a one name, it's Fredlin, I believe. If you could please state your full name and go ahead and your address for the record, please.
There we go. This is Randall Smith. I'm Joan Shretlin's husband. And we live at 40 Glen Drive. We've been here for 30 years. I'm supportive of many of the things that have been said, and I'm not going to repeat them to grind it in. You guys have heard it all. But I have a couple of points. One is we live in Warner Canyon, not some flat area like down by Sycamore. That park is a flat area. It is one of the very few flat areas anywhere nearby. You mentioned the golf course. The golf course, somebody said, well, Sundays in the morning, once a month. What's that got to do with kids every day in the afternoon, etc.? You kids can't be wandering around on the golf course. It's not realistic. That park is a realistic place for small kids and for other people to just gather rather than saying you can, it's essentially saying you can go to the park once a month. That's ridiculous. I feel like you all have made a rush to a conclusion because it's convenient, which is there's some property, sell it, and we'll get some money, and then we can invest it. I agree with everyone else. This is an entire community of Mill Valley issue. And yes, it's hard work. And yes, if it requires 2/3, you're going to have to do whatever you have to do, and you'll enlist people in the community to help you to raise awareness and mobilize people to accept increased taxes, increased sales taxes, whatever is necessary. That's much harder work than just essentially cannibalizing a neighborhood's park. And I think that's where the direction should be, is into increased taxes so that we can get what's necessary here. Thank you.
Next up, we have Paul Fitzgerald. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you giving me a couple minutes. I'm Paul Fitzgerald, 438 Edgewood Avenue. I've been a resident, my wife and I have been residents of Mill Valley since 1976. One of the parcels under consideration we saw was Edgewood Botanical Garden, which is at the corner of Edgewood and Cypress. It's about a 0.45 acre parcel that was actually on the list of botanical gardens and international list for a while. But we do have mature plants there, and it's a very nice open space that we appreciate. The neighbors have helped maintain this little garden for many years, and actually are in the process of working with a nice TAM student, Grayson Everidge, for his Eagle Scout project and he selected this for that. And we hope to improve the little park, and it's a little gem, and it's kind of a quirky little place, but we really would prefer not to see it sold for housing, because then it's gone forever. And that's all I have to say. And thank you very much, commission members, for your time and all your efforts.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Adam Bain. Adam, if you could, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hey, it's Adam Bain. I live at 24 Glen Drive in Mill Valley, and have lived here for over a decade. I live a couple-minute walk from the park and the golf course, and I'm extremely opposed to the city taking over open green space and then selling them off. I think it's a totally poorly thought out idea and a terrible precedent. And more importantly, it's not consistent with the general plan. As Alan said at the beginning of this meeting, the general plan goals are to enhance the natural beauty of Mill Valley and encourage affordable housing. Yet the proposal of taking natural space means you're in conflict with the first part of that charter. So it's intellectually lazy to say, boy, we can't do both. Yet looking at the site analysis and recommendation, it appears exactly what you've done. Incidentally, we heard early in the discussion about a parking lot. I mean, really, we're debating a park versus a parking lot. I applaud you, Greg, because you were asking the right questions. Before we go around like monopoly cowboys selling off our city-owned green space, we should be exploring some of the questions that you were asking. I liked your questions. It became very clear. Some of these things are not the easy things, but they are the right things. Removing some of these neighborhood gems like parks obviously will impact home values for all of us in the neighborhood. In fact, if you go back and look at some of the descriptions of homes for sale, you'll see that they all list the park and the playground and golf course as assets. So essentially what you're doing is putting the burden of financing the affordable housing disproportionately on the homeowners in this neighborhood. That burden or responsibility should be shared by all of the residents in Mill Valley. I totally appreciated the discussion about tax, but basically the message I heard was, hey, making this a fairly shared burden by all of Mill Valley is a great idea, but it's a hard idea. So instead of putting forward the hard thing, we're just gonna do the lazy thing. So I think it's a total waste of our taxpayer money to go waste time trying to investigate a study on a park. Go find a site first and then determine how to pay for it.
All right, Adam, your time has expired. Thank you for your comment.
By the way, it's a little after 9. We've got about 20 people with their hands still up, so you can do the math on how much time will elapse as we continue our comments on this topic.
Next, we have Melinda Nykamp. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and ask for you to be unmuted.
Yes, this is Melinda Nykamp. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My wife and I and our 2 kids reside at 10 Sheridan Court. We have lived in the Scott Highlands neighborhood in a couple of different properties over the last 20 years. The home we're currently in is the previous home of the very smart gentleman who developed the Scott Highlands neighborhood. He had a lot of lots to sell and probably made a lot of money selling them some 70 years ago. And he had the great foresight. He was selling a lot of lots in the hills with absolutely no ability to have yards. So he decided, let me take the absolute finest spot right smack dab down here and let everybody enjoy it. Then they don't have to all be building retaining walls or figuring out how to get backyards. And so for the last 70 years, as you've heard from so many, that's why people buy into this neighborhood. You don't have to have your own yard. This is one of the tenets of green development and urban planning right now, is shared spaces and shared community spaces. So any thought that, oh, I wonder why this is still open, why don't we sell this off, is so contrary to everything that our neighborhood's about. We're all in favor of diversity. We're in favor of affordable housing, and we do feel it's one of many priorities right now, but we do feel it needs to be something that is funded by the city and a collective of the city, and not somehow, I can't even imagine the notion that we're going to take away someone's park to do it. And that's really, our sentiment, and I think the sentiment of so many.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Elias K. If you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and ask that you unmute.
Hi, my name is Elias K. This is a tough issue, and I'm hearing a lot of people really care about this park. We have a crisis right now in Marin County and in Mill Valley, and in all of the Bay Area, which is that people like me, people of color who work here, we can only afford to live here if we live with our parents, or if we have gotten into one of the very few affordable housing areas in Marin County. So a lot of the friends that I have who work here work for Amazon, or they work for the food delivery companies that service Mill Valley. And most of them sleep in their cars. Some of them have kids. Their kids sleep with them in their cars. That's a rough way to grow up. So I understand that this is giving something up, but I hope that we can take this more as a celebration, that we can change people's lives for the better, and we can really do something for the community. I heard Melinda speak before me about the planning of the neighborhood where she owns her home. That happened 70 years ago. That was at a time when my grandparents would have been forbidden by law to buy a house in that neighborhood. And I really hope that the folks living around this park can see what it will do for people if the city has that money to spend on low-income housing.
Thank you, Elias, for your comments. Next up, we have Eric Martini. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute and allow you to speak. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Hi, my name's Eric Martini. I live at 264 Cardinal Road. Thank you, Elias, for bringing some semblance of reality back into this conversation. This is a very critical time for a lot of people. And we Mill Valley residents need to realize how much privilege we have. So yeah, I want to voice my support for low-income housing in Mill Valley, in this lot and in the rest of the golf course and in every other possible lot we can find. The time is now, and every day that we wait to house people of color who work here is another day of needless pain for them. I do agree with the concern about many of the residents who have spoken regarding financial impact on their community specifically. I think that's very unfair. Clearly, they're already giving something up, and giving up money for something that's already affecting them negatively is very unfair, and that should not be part of the funding. I think the cost should be spread throughout Mill Valley. and in fact should be sourced from existing city spending that is maybe too high, such as the police. So that was a very good point that I heard a lot of people bring up. But a lot of the other points really, they were very telling of the overwhelming white privilege that really thrives in this town, and the racist legacy of redlining that is clearly still alive and well in Mill Valley, however unconscious it may be. I really want to hear what these residents are willing to give up to help people in need. Because if a portion of the park near your house is too much, you know, what are you willing to give up to help someone who really needs it? I, for one, would happily give up any of the public areas of my neighborhood
Your time
personally.
has expired.
So
Thank you for
examine
your
your
comment.
privilege and make a small sacrifice for people in need. Thank you.
Next, we have Susan Simpkin. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and ask for you to be unmuted here.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm Susan Simpkin. I live at 44 Glen Drive in Mill Valley. I grew up in this neighborhood. My parents built the house in '64, and our house used to be egg dyeing central back when real eggs used to be used for egg hunts, and they were donated by Jim Canepa of Mill Valley Market. And as discussed at length already, the grassy field continues to be used for community activities and really is an integral part of our neighborhood and allows a place for kids to be free range in the same way that we were back in the 60s. A point that I haven't seen or heard rather raised that Greg also brought up at the beginning of his comments was that our neighborhood is a really high risk fire area. And there's only one ingress and egress, Buena Vista, which splits into Vista Linda and Glen Drive. And in the event of a fire in Warner Canyon, it would be very difficult for people to escape the area. And I don't think I'm being over dramatic if I said that what is proposed as Lot 1, which is not at the 7th tee, but rather at the 7th green, it would be blocking an area that would allow really immediate access for neighbors to evacuate to the fire evacuation area that is the golf course. To try and get out there in an emergency otherwise, there's just one small road at this time that goes through the redwoods that's next to the 7th tee. But it would be feasible to cut the wires and get fire safety out onto the fairway and people out onto this fairway. So please consider not just that it's a grassy field, but a fire security area for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have Jeff Meyer. Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and ask that you be unmuted, and if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, I am Jeff Meyer. I'm on Magdalena Court. I've been here for about 2 years, and a couple comments on the comments. It seems to me the 3% figure is kind of misleading. I would suggest that of the green, grassy open space where people can do unstructured activities, it's pretty close to 100% of the available space that we have for that purpose. Areas inside the golf course where you have to worry about getting hit by a golf ball or other things, just it's not comparable. And I would also suggest that it's not comparable to fire roads or hiking trails or any other kind of open space. It doesn't have a fence around it. People can come and go. And we had two very eloquent speakers earlier, younger people, but it's not just kids who are older than is good for a playground. It's also middle schoolers, it's teenagers looking to do whatever teenagers do. It's older people who get out there and swing. There's a guy who's got a really bad short game, I can tell. when I ride my bike by. You know, so it's for the whole neighborhood. It really is helpful. And I appreciate the sentiment of Elias and some other people who spoke. No one on this call I have heard say they don't want to help solve this problem. No one on this call has said anything about not making a sacrifice. They all want to help with the homeless problem, or no, excuse me, with the low income housing problem that we have, and we want to increase diversity. But I think I echo everyone else's thoughts. Hey, we just rather pay for it differently than with our neighborhood park. We all bought houses here with the expectation that we could use that, and people do use it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Carolyn Priest. I'm going to go ahead and unmute, and if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Carolyn Price, and I'm at 21 Sheridan Court in Mill Valley. And I wasn't planning on speaking this evening, so my thoughts aren't quite as cohesive as I would like, but I've been struck by two things in the course of this evening. One, it was a comment very early on by the committee's presentation talking about skin in the game. And the other thing that has struck me is just about every single person who I've heard speak tonight that I know because I met in our neighborhood park. And I take exception to the city's proposal that talks about the revitalization of the playground. Use those words, and also the words that the parcel is underutilized. So first I want to talk about skin in the game. In 2003, I formed a committee called Save Scott Highlands Park, whose goal was to save the park from being stripped of all the playground equipment because it was no longer to code. And I was advised by the city of Mill Valley that we like to see neighbors who have skin in the game. And if you help us and you meet us with your efforts and with your fundraising, then we would like to meet you and help you have Prop 40 money that has become available on a one-time use it or lose it basis. So we galvanized this neighborhood that already has a reputation for being quite unified. And we raised $50,000 to compared to what Parks and Rec put in, which was $40,000. So we had skin in the game. And more than that, we physically helped build this park. We organized and we designed a drainage for the field, and we got helpers to go out there and physically install the equipment and physically install drainage in this field where no one has been before. And unfortunately, I'm out of time, but we have a gem in this neighborhood that we have put our time and energy and our resources in. And we are asking—
Thank you for your comments. Carolyn, your time has expired.
Your time and energy and resources to find an alternative that everybody supports affordable housing and wants to play fairly.
Carolyn,
thank you.
Thank you for your time, your comments. If you have any further comments, please, I'll just remind everyone there's planning at cityofmillvalley.org. See, next up is June Cooperman. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and ask that you be unmuted.
Hello, my name is June Cooperman. I live on Mid Hill Drive in Scott Valley, where I've lived for 25 years as a homeowner. I'm also one of the co-founders of Mill Valley Community Action Network, which is primarily composed of Mill Valley residents. Hundreds and hundreds of whom have not only said that they would support affordable housing, but have also expressed interest in making sacrifices of various types in order for that to happen, understanding how difficult it is to move these things forward. So I have a couple of comments. One is that we'd also like to request to have a spokesperson for the Pro-Affordable Housing Coalition and groups and individuals in Mill Valley at the next city council meeting, which, and there's a formal also coalition of housing groups, to also have 5 to 7 minutes or whatever is allowed, to also represent the other individuals in the city. I would like to also address this issue of the sacrifice of by the neighbors in Scott Highlands. I think in this process, looking at the big picture, there will be many neighborhoods. I know they feel set upon, but there's the neighborhood that's going to get this development. And then there'll be another neighborhood that has the other development. And then there's Scott Valley, where I hope we have a piece of property, because I would love to have my neighbor be a little bit more crowded and a little noisier and a little denser, so that I could be living in a city with meaningful, affordable housing developments that are dedicated. So yeah, so I think there'll be many communities and many neighborhoods in many ways that will be asked to make sacrifices of different degrees and in different manners over the course of the next decade, or however long it takes for us to get where we need to go and be fair and diverse and equitable.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next, we have Ethan Stroll. Ethan, if you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Ethan Stroll, and I grew up in Marin and do not live in a home in Mill Valley anymore, but I work as a housing organizer here in Marin. Let's be clear that the Mill Valley community already includes those who work here, even if they are forced to drive from far away, and those who had the ingenuity to recognize the beauty of Mill Valley and wanted to move here in the past, but were unable to due to redlining, racially exclusionary neighborhood covenants, or more recently due to Mill Valley's high prices. These people are already part of the community, even if they are not yet residents. Mill Valley has the opportunity to build subsidized affordable homes for low-income community members on this city-owned land. This is land that should benefit community members of Mill Valley, and those that need it most right now are the people I just mentioned. It seems like the Scott Highlands Park is valued by the folks that live around it, and it is one of many open spaces around the neighborhood. We are blessed to have bountiful open space across the county. Committee members, please recommend that the council facilitate the construction of these affordable homes in Mill Valley so that the city can lead the way in making Marin a more equitable place. I also want to add that the scope of our historic exclusion in Marin is a lot larger than what the homes, just the homes at the parcel by the golf course can solve. To start to push for a more equitable Marin, like June mentioned, neighborhoods across Mill Valley and Marin will have to build affordable housing near them. The Scott Highlands neighborhood and other neighborhoods have the opportunity to create change near them. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Rebecca Collins. If you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi. I first made my home in Mill Valley when I moved here in 1982. I worked as the maid for some high power executives who lived in Strawberry, and I biked and worked at the Mill Valley Book Depot. My daughter lives in Tam Junction in the house of her boyfriend's parents, because even between the two of them working, they can't live in their own place in Marin County, working on $15, $18 an hour. And, you know, I've also spent a lot of time working on climate change, and I want to remind us that, you know, we are on the crux of mass migrations of people. We are on the crux of, you know, of people getting burned out every year and having to move to places that are safer. We are on the crux of a sea level rise that's already happening in Tam Junction, as I'm sure all of you know. You know, what I heard was, yes, I feel for having raised kids, having something taken away from a neighborhood. You know, and that may not even happen. But the thing is, you know, I've watched in other areas where the community came out and fought the low-income housing for such a long time that it lost funding. You know, and everybody's saying, well, you should have your ducks in a row and you should do this. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand how hard that is. And it is so critical that we figure out how to house our people. It is so important, especially with what we have facing us, which is more than I think we can even envision. So thank you so much for all your hard work. You know, I just hope that the community of Mill Valley will do more than say that they want to support diversity and they want to do this and they want to do that, but actually do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next, I do not have a name, simply a phone number, and that phone number is ending in 0652. Going to go ahead and ask that you be unmuted, and if you could state your full name and address for the record. Okay, looks like we're having a little bit of difficulties. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next person in the queue. And if you could please raise your hand back again and perhaps change your name to reflect on there instead of just the phone number. I appreciate it. Next, we have Dennis Klein. Dennis, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and ask that you state your name and address for the record. Dennis, are you there? Okay, Dennis, I've went ahead and sent the request to unmute. I'll give you a couple more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and move to the next person in the queue, and I can come back to you. Next, we have Barbara Macho. Barbara, if you could please state your full name and address for the record. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, this is Jeff Mako. I think I'm connected. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. It's, again, Jeff Mako at 303 Vista Linda Drive. And first, I'd like to say that I really appreciate this open forum, and it gives really a broad range of people a chance to really voice their point of view. Also, that I fully support affordable housing and expanding the diversity in Mill Valley, which I think will add so much to the community. But I do disagree with this proposal to sell this open green space. And I believe that this does not need to be an either-or decision. I think that if done right, we can have both affordable housing and be able to keep our precious parks throughout all of Mill Valley. This grassy park is not just a parcel on a map. You know, as we've heard tonight, this area is a center and a heart and soul of this neighborhood. It's where children and families and grandparents play, celebrate, socialize, relax, and really come together as a community. We just moved here a couple years ago, and I know many people have been here for 20 to 50 years, but we found that coming here, it was a place to be welcomed. It was a place to meet our neighbors, to get acquainted, to build friendships. And whether it's in an organized event or an informal setting or just passing through, it's a place to come together. And without this park at the center, it just becomes a collection of houses and streets because there is no soul left for people to come together in. I would also just lastly add that I think having a plan to pursue the raising of funds by selling off these valuable parcels is putting the cart before the horse. Now, first there needs to be an affordable housing plan.
Thank you for your comment. The time has expired. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have I just have one. It's not a full name, Brian. If you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jason Rubin. Bria Rubin, my wife, is the one who put her name in. We live at 18 Heather Way. We just want to express, first off, thank you very much for this open forum. We realize it's very late. It's a long day for all of you. And this is tough. I'm an emergency room physician. I work over, it used to be Marin General. I'm actually, part of the reason I chose emergency medicine is to take care of anyone and anyone. We don't care about insurance, right? Anyone who walks through my door, that's who I take care of. My wife worked at the VA in Palo Alto. She drove tirelessly there to work with vets. All races, all creeds, it doesn't matter. We believe in equity. But we bought our house 5 years ago. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my father's 82. He can't walk up the fire road when he visits pre-COVID. I have that dream that for the next few years, once we get through the pandemic, I can take my dad to that park in 5 more years, should he still be alive, because that's a place he can actually walk and enjoy the outside. I want to still be able to take my 6-year-old and 3-year-old to the park for the next so many years. We have a steep driveway. We chose this community for the people and the natural beauty. And again, I know there's a lot of heartfelt comments out there, particularly the ones that move me are actually the ones in favor of selling the land. But look, we have a new hospital. We just moved in yesterday. It was really hard work to convince the county to fund that. And I really ask you all in your positions to work super hard. It is hard to find a way to find other funds. But I ask you because that's why me and my family moved here.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Jay Sweet. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Wonderful, thanks. I'm Jay Sweet. I'm at 7 Heather Way. Susan and I have been here for 40 years. And I've been one of the myriad Easter bunnies over the years at Scott Highlands Park. I think Carolyn said it, where we have skin in the game in this little park. You know, I think it was about the mid-'80s where the city didn't have the funds to work in the park. So Rod Seeger, who was the head of the association at the time, and I got a Kubota over. We leveled the field, we regraded it, we figured it out with a whole bunch of neighborhood carpenters and helpers. And this is the pre-2003 work. So we have a lot of fabulous memories about that little jewel of a park. And I think part of the frustration that you may be hearing, and it's really, I haven't heard very much real, true frustration, but we didn't hear about this whole process for a couple of, about 3 or 4 days ago. So I think by being blindsided with this, I think that even kind of created more of a reaction than what might have happened. But we all support affordable housing. We all want Mill Valley to be more diverse. We want the workers to be nearby and to be able to live here. So do we want our the jewels of our park sold or not? And I don't want them. Sam, you want to say one thing?
For 20 seconds.
I'm Jay Sweet's son.
I grew up here. I have a lot of close memories. That park means a lot to me. At the same time, what we have going on right now is a lot, and we need to make sacrifices. I think this is important to discuss further. I think there's compromises. I don't think it's either or. I think that property behind the 7th green is definitely up for grabs. Anyway, I appreciate all of you. I think this is a good conversation to have. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Jim Ross. Jim, if you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Jim, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, sir, Jim. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to skip comments that have, would echo a lot of what other people said and throw out a couple other ideas. I personally think that rather than looking only at a large 40-plus unit development, the city should consider smaller projects for affordable and low-income housing sprinkled throughout the community. I think the ADU program is probably the easiest and best candidate. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that the Mill Valley ADU program is more restrictive than actually state law requires. And if that's true, I think we should look into that. I think that program should be easy and fast to navigate. And I think that a way to really leverage funds would be consider loan or grant programs for units, ADU units dedicated to low income housing. Also, I want to talk about funding. We've talked about bonds that would take a 2/3 vote, but there's also types of bonds. I used to work in this field called basically sale leasebacks of property. I don't know if this is currently allowed under state law, but we could advocate for a change in law that would allow us to sell city property, like even the city hall, and then lease it back. We would basically, it's basically a loan, and you would share the cost by the community at large. It would be spread over many years, and right now we have very historically low interest rates. Also, we could look at volunteer community donations, and if it's really a high priority, we could examine closely if there's other programs or services that are lower priority. I think it's not good public policy to sell off a lot at all, a park, but it's also not fair just for one neighborhood to bear the cost of something that's going to benefit the entire community. That is the building of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Gabrielle Stricker. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, so this is Gabriel Stricker and I live at 200 Sarah Drive. And just to start, I'd like to commend the committee for prioritizing affordable housing. This is clearly a critical need for Mill Valley. It's a critical element for ensuring that our community is diverse. But I'd also like to commend the city for its ongoing attention to preserving our public open spaces and parklands in particular. And the park that we've been discussing tonight is no exception. So my hope is that the city needn't choose between these two positives, its current prioritization of affordable housing and its history of prioritizing parklands. It's certainly possible to achieve both. And we've heard a number of proposals tonight that would accomplish that. So I guess in short, I just believe strongly that we should do everything that we can to establish the important precedent of funding affordable housing, and we should do everything that we can to avoid establishing what would be a really dangerous precedent of converting existing parklands into new development. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Alvaro Pastor. If you could please state your full name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Alvaro Pastor. I live on Eaton Way in Mill Valley, and I want to thank the committee for their hard work to address the affordable housing crisis here in Mill Valley. With Marin County property values rising decade after decade, Mill Valley has become a place where only a few privileged can afford to live. The need for affordable housing in Mill Valley has become increasingly important and plays a critical role in creating a diverse community that better represents the world that our children will face as they mature into young adults. At what point do we consider those who cannot afford to own or rent a home in the very place where they spend most of their day working? Shouldn't they also have the opportunity to live here? These are the very folks that we rely on every day to watch over and educate our children, to provide us with food at various restaurants and grocery stores, cut our hair, deliver our packages, assist us in the library, and create art that adds to our rich culture. These people represent a valuable part of our community, and we must advocate for them. Without affordable housing, we will continue to lose these folks, as they will eventually look elsewhere for communities that will support them and their valuable contributions. If you've lived here long enough, you'd remember that Mill Valley used to be an eclectic place where struggling artists, musicians, and a broader mix of cultures thrived as a community. If we don't take the time to address this important issue, we can expect more of the same, which would be a real shame for Mill Valley. I hear a lot of talk about the need to be more inclusive, open-minded, and to add much needed diversity to a predominantly privileged community. But when it comes time for such change and it affects their neighborhood, those voices often become silent. We are fortunate to have lots of open spaces to enjoy, but there are only a few places that can be considered for such projects. And while I empathize with all of the neighbors affected, Mill Valley desperately needs socioeconomic and, frankly, all forms of diversity. I think there are times when we need to make real difficult sacrifices.
Sorry, but your time has expired. I'd like to thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Next up, I'm sorry about this. I'm gonna mispronounce your name here. It's Silman. Well, now it's gone. Pastor, let me go ahead and unmute you and ask if you can please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Salamine Pastor. Thank you for your time. And I'm calling to say that I support this housing proposal. I've sat here and listened to just about every comment on this issue. And, you know, I have to say, I have yet to hear a strong argument for not exploring this project. All I hear are people saying, yes, I support low-income housing, but just not in my backyard. And, you know, I have to say, as leaders, you have to make tough decisions. If we're waiting for public opinion to shift on this issue, we will never have more affordable housing in Mill Valley. If leaders never went against public opinion, Black and white children would never be allowed to attend school together. And so I'm just hoping that you do what's right and not think about, oh, well, I better not go against what people are saying, because you know what's right. And, you know, I just hope you do what's right. And thank you for your hard work. I yield my time.
So I can see that we have only a couple more hands raised at this point, and I would like to close public comment at this time. It's 9:47, and we'd like to get on to deliberation. So can we, at this point, wrap up? That's it in terms of people who are going to speak. So I see there's a couple left. So why don't we take care of those two?
Yeah, I think the phone number, that's the one that dropped, so we'll try to do that. I see the Price family trying to raise their hand. They've had two comments already, so I respect.
Go ahead. That's fine. Let's just, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, go ahead. I just want to get on to the, okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask them to please send any additional comments to the planning at cityofmillvalley.org. Thank you.
So we have a couple left, is that right, Joe, and the phone number?
Yes. Joe Heidi, if you could please unmute, and I'll ask that you state your full name and address for the record.
Yes, this is Joe Heady at 341 Vista Linda Drive. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't want to voice my opinion of I'm against selling this park, the Scott Highlands Park, and any park in Mill Valley. I just think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. These parks are gems in Mill Valley, and like everybody has already said, we'll never get them back. As far as an alternative, I like the ADU method. I think you got to be creative there. I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that we're empty nesters now. We have bedrooms open. There's a lot of space, underutilized space, like you guys call it, that's available in the city right now that could be used for, I guess, low-cost housing. And maybe like our house, maybe the city or the county gives some money to retrofit these bedrooms so there's a separate entrance, maybe a kitchen, there's some, but with that money comes a contract for that person where, we have to rent it out for low cost housing for X amount of years, and there's, something drawn up. You just got to be creative. I think there's a lot of real estate out in this town right now that's just not being utilized. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. So we have Phil Hindenburger. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and ask that you state your name and address for the record.
Hello, this is Phil Hindenburger. I live at 19 Glen Drive. I've lived in Mill Valley now for 46 years. I had the very worthwhile experience of working with the city and the school board in the 80s to pass parcel taxes. There was a lot of skepticism at first, but we got it done. And the reason we got it done, we weren't talking about school buildings. We were talking about the people who were going to be in the school buildings, the children. And I would suggest that you pitch the people who are going to live in the affordable housing, not the buildings themselves. We are all for the school teachers. I can tell you, I spent a good part of my volunteer activity over the last 42 years boosting schools and boosting teachers. We're all for the firemen. We're all for all of you and all of your staff. And so if you talk up the people who are going to be helped and not focus so much on the real estate and all the technicals, you'll pass a parcel tax. You'll get a sales tax. You'll be able to get a community transfer tax. All those things are very doable. We did it before. In fact, we did a road bond and we did a school bond at the very same election. And that was 3 years after Prop 13. And people were saying, you'll never do it. Well, Sausalito didn't do it. Even Ross couldn't do it. But Mill Valley did it. Now, I know a lot of you weren't around back then, but this community mobilized. And it mobilized because they cared about the people. And that's really what we're talking about. I know you all care about the people. You care about your staff at the city. I care about the school teachers who can't afford to live here. And there's other groups like Mill Valley CAM that's spoken several times tonight, June's organization. They care about a completely different constituency. And you gather all those people together, all those different.
Okay, Bill, your time has expired. I appreciate your comments. We'll go ahead and go to the next caller here. The next caller is just a phone number that we had on earlier. If you could please state your name and address for the record. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and allow you to go ahead and have your comment time.
So Mark, we're going to close off public comment after these next three people who have indicated. So, deal with Wilson, Rebecca, and Colleen, please, and then that'll be it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Hello?
Okay, are you there? Yes. If you could please state your name and address for the record. Hello, are you there?
Dennis Klein? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm Dennis Klein for 347 Hazel Avenue. I'm not speaking for the entire Mill Valley Affordable Housing Committee, but I would like to go long on what I've heard tonight. David Hume, that's the guy all our founders knew way too well, who emboldened them to replace the king with cause and effect. He wrote in his essays in 1752, delicacy of taste is as much to be desired and cultivated as delicacy of passion is to be lamented and be remedied if possible. Delicacy of passion in regards to housing today is entrenched preservation of local traditions, no regard for the inconveniences to others. Delicacy of taste in regards to housing today is being aware of the whole world from the beginning to the end and everything in it and nothing left out, and how you can personally make the whole thing better. Or love locally, rewarded globally. Or the new feel good is giving ground. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Next up, we have Winston Barnes. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time today. It's coming up on 10 o'clock. I live on 38 Sandy Lane. I'm not usually accustomed to this forum, but I did want to go first and say that I am against selling the property for a number of reasons. It does not mean that I'm not for affordable housing. I'm not for diversity. It doesn't mean that that I don't follow many of the people that have spoken against or for. One thing that's happened to us is that we have lost our fire insurance, and that was from about 3 weeks ago, which means this is a high critical fire area. If there's affordable housing, which means 40 units, 10 units, it's going to be very difficult for myself and other neighbors of this area to move down off the hill. That is something I believe you should take into account. There's been a number of good ideas, and this is the first time I've heard of this, so there hasn't been a great deal of preparation. But the ideas would be the that everyone's mentioned for the home match idea, the ADUs, the short-term rentals, to outlaw the rentals, look for other places to leverage. I have to commend Greg for bringing up ideas from the beginning that weren't brought up in the initial conversation. It seemed as if John did not know Matt before he got on, and it seemed as if I was trying to follow the conversation because you kind of led him along and he answered your questions, which means that I'm a salesman and I just don't want to be played in this situation. That's what it feels like, but it is a dangerous area. So you have to take that into account. I'm against it. And it does not mean that I'm not for diversity, doesn't mean affordable housing, but I believe there are definitely different methods that we need to exhaust before we move on this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Rebecca Price. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Price, and my address is 21 Sheridan Court. And thank you for letting me speak. I have a quick comment, which is to say that it's completely possible to create lots of affordable housing without selling Scott Highlands Field. Like others have mentioned, accessory dwelling units are a way to create affordable housing that fully integrate lower income families into the community at no cost to the city without the need to raise funds at all, let alone by selling parks. So I urge you and all Mill Valley residents to look into the viability of ADUs before focusing exclusively on an expensive to build, controversial to fund single location affordable housing complex. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like the last caller here is Colleen Brine. If you could please state your name and address for the record, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi guys, this is Colleen Byrne over on Vista Linda Way, or Vista Linda Drive, and actually I do not want to speak tonight. I actually raised my hand, so Rebecca Priest, but it sounds like she came through the queue. So I'm going to give you guys 2 more minutes back so you can start discussing things. Good night.
Thank you.
Bless you. Okay, so I think that's it, right? I think we've received all of our public comments. It's now 10 p.m. and we're going to come into our deliberative phase. So Danielle, do me a favor, put that share screen up for just a minute. And I think it's like slide 34, 35, which is what the action steps are that are under consideration, just to remind the 5 of us what we are deliberating about. And you can just quickly run over that if you could, Danielle.
Yep, let me get there.
Making you work pretty hard tonight.
Thank you to Mark. I'm going to let Mark leave, but thank you to Mark for his helping me here.
Yeah, so that's the big picture of what we're trying to do, right? So let's just run through that real quick. Remind us that the question is, do we want to recommend to council that we use trust funds to confirm the analysis and bring in a real estate perspective and a not-for-profit perspective, and then, develop what we've done so far in a subcommittee, kind of stretch it out, put some more effort into the proof of concept, and then, based on what we learn there, report back to the committee and council on recommendations. And that's the first step. There is a second step later, but really it depends on what that first step yields for us. But the second step would be to, go through the actual process, which includes both potentially the sale of some property and then the development of a low-income unit. So that's what we're talking about in the big picture. And with that, I think you can probably drop the slide, and I'd like to begin the deliberation. You can respond to anything you've heard or focus specifically on what is direction for staff to bring to council. And why don't we start with Matt Franklin, who evidently I don't know well, but I do.
Great, thanks, John. I'd like to thank Mark Collier too. I think this is our 8th or 9th meeting. We haven't had the pleasure of such a gracious and professional host. I'm in meetings like this a couple nights a week for the last 30 years, and I don't know if I've heard such a good facilitator of the comments. I also really want to thank the commenters on all sides, and especially my neighbors who are bringing a lot of passion to this. With genuine sincerity, and I think in a really values-driven way. And I feel it's in a spirit of competing values here and respect for how individuals may weigh those differently. I also just want to recognize the leadership of the association, Paul Chulgian, Rod Seeger. You guys do amazing work, and it does bind the community, and community development is gold, and it's really, really special. I also, before I get into my deliberation, I want to just one technical matter, and then I'll share my thoughts on where we are. There's a lot of discussion about the cart before the horse, raise the money before you know what the project is. I just want to take a minute on that. The reason for that is you have to buy the land. And right now, the analysis says that it's most likely that the development would occur on privately owned land, underutilized land in town that can be developed. Could be a church site, could be some of the failing commercial sites, could be the PG&E building, who knows? It could be places, but they're privately owned. And just like when you buy your home, in today's market, you can't go tie up a contract on buying land and say, I'll get back to you in 2 months when I sell some other land, right? We used to do that with our homes 20 years ago. The market doesn't allow it now. And we've had very deliberate meetings, a lot of work around the concept of what we would build. But specifically what you would build, the entitlement process, the design process, you can't spend money on that until you own land. Nobody's going to do it. So you need the liquidity to buy the land. Okay. So that's why, you know, you get into this timing where you sell the land, you get the money, you incentivize people to go find the exact site, and then you do the work. I just explaining that as to there's a reason for what folks feel like cart before the horse. It's very common. It's not lazy. It's what the market demands to get something done. Okay, that's just responding to one of the technical questions. Just my thoughts to take a minute on this and to step back kind of where we began. You know, I just go back to the fact that we haven't built meaningful new permanent affordable housing here in 25 years. And I think the reason that is because it requires change. You know, if we really want to be a more inclusive and diverse and equitable community, we have to make room. The change requires that we make room. And you know, in Scott Highlands, it would require change if we move forward with this. We'd have to adapt how we gather and how we bind as a community socially and how we recreate. And as one of the speakers pointed out, in some other part of town, we would pursue development, construction. So that neighborhood would adapt to the change of construction in their neighborhood. And if we can get our workers in here, our families, then their kids are going to get to go to our schools. And you know what? You got to create room in the classroom for those kids too, right? So it's going to touch other people. It's change, and it's making room, and it's adaptation, and it's hard. It's real, it's hard. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in community discussions where you get to this point and the natural reaction is, let's do it that way. How about this other way? Let's do this. It's natural. And it's well-intentioned here. I will tell you that a tax for a specific purpose for housing in the state of California requires a 2/3 vote. I work with pollsters all over the Bay Area. I work on this extensively. You will not find a pollster that will tell you that that's going to happen in the next year or two in this town. Okay, we can find our way to schools. That has happened. And I love that one of my neighbors was part of that. And he's right, you talk about the people. But the 2/3 bar in this town, and we got a great start. I think 100% of the speakers today are in. And I'm in with you. Let's do it. But that's going to take a long time. And it's not lazy to say that, it's realistic. And ADUs are really important. And Joe did some great analysis on ADUs. I have a nonprofit that's part of our family of nonprofits that specializes on ADUs. There's more potential in this town for ADUs. But ADUs don't serve families. They serve individuals, maybe a mom with a kid. So it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not this piece of the puzzle. You know, if we can become more inclusive, diverse, and equitable, we're going to be richer for it. And I heard many of you say that, and I just believe it. People are going to bring their lived experience. You know, the people who drive through our neighborhood every day, cutting our grass, working in our schools, serving us food, serving us coffee, get to live in this neighborhood. They have lived experience. They bring enormous qualities. We will be richer for them, not just working with us or for us, but living among us. And I can just tell you on this idea of we have an opportunity to be part of this in a meaningful way. The experience of that permanent housing, 40 families, and then 40 again, and 40 again, and 40 again on turnover. If you just take their kids, the stability of permanent housing alone is the #1 indicator of performance in schools. You don't have to move all the time. And if they can get into our schools, the opportunity in our schools, you've changed their life forever. You've changed the wealth curve of that family for generations to come. The returns on education are exponential between some high school, some college, masters. Every little step, enormous returns. So I'm just convinced this is an enormous opportunity for us. We are a small town. We do not have a lot of paths to raise $3 to $5 million. We have looked at a lot of paths, and this is a real one. And I think it could just be really a powerful experience for all of us. I've heard people tell me in the neighborhood that the Highlands Association will die if this happens, and I just will sincerely tell you, I just really hope that's not the case if this goes forward. And I don't think it will be. We will have to adapt. We will gather in different places. We will gather more on the playground. We will gather on the golf course, on the, what the opening salvo that Alec gave us was 12 days a year. And with John's help, maybe we can get that higher. One of my neighbors who I really value, their kids were putting fairy doors in the space somebody mentioned between the 6th green and the 7th tee. I agree. You can't go in there and just let kids run around. But I think we could use that space for some meaningful gatherings, and we could work with the city to make it more protected. It's a big, nice space for golfers to just walk through. Some of the letters talk about building forts on the land. I appreciate not everyone can hike the Blythedale Ridge or Corte Madera Ridge. But I'll tell you what, the fort building opportunity just at the Tartan Trail, if you go up just a little bit, that redwood forest, is incredible. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying there's not loss. There will be loss. And if this happens. And I recognize it's hard, but we're a community of means. We're a community of capacity. I think we can do this. I do. And I think that the reality of this is not just one neighborhood. And it will touch all neighborhoods, and it requires making room in the whole city. And I also think, and I hope that we do work together. And in 4 years at the next presidential election, which is the best time to try to get something hard and progressive done, we do get more money. And then other communities will have an opportunity, like we do, to step out and to lead on this meaningful change that is hard change, but that is so meaningful for our community. So I wholeheartedly support these actions. I think it's important to do this additional work to confirm the analysis. And if the analysis bears it out, then I intend to support moving this forward to the council. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. How about we do Gregory next, please?
Thanks, Chair. So I just want to start by, I want to thank Danielle and staff's hard work on all that staff report. As I have seen many times through the Planning Commission, staff does a lot of work. The subcommittee did a lot of work, and I do appreciate that. But I have to say my first impression looking at that was kind of what some of the questions I asked earlier, which is, I think we really need, innovative solutions for multifamily affordable housing, and we need to identify, affordable housing sites. And, from reading that report, I actually, and listening to Adam and some other comments about, what about the public safety building lot? That is owned by the city, it's my understanding. And, so I look at that and I think there's some really innovative ideas that could happen with lot number 1 and lot number 2. And I know that might impact some existing locations of PV panels, but it's right next to a park. It's right on a hill. It's not in a floodplain. It's not that far from transit. People can access the community. They can get to the schools. They can get to the parks. And for me, it's it's really important to come up with ideas on how to pay for this that don't take away important assets for the community. And, that, to kind of, from my personal experience, that's not underutilized. My son, we had his 10th birthday party there. I'm not in the neighborhood, but that's part of our community. And having a flat grassy area in Mill Valley is very difficult to find. So I think that's just an important asset that's to the community. And I know a number of other, people have reached out to me that aren't in the neighborhood as well and feel the same way. I have done many hikes looping back through along the golf course on that road there. And the traffic congestion there is challenging. Developing more large FAR homes on single family homes that would then most likely have some additional development on them will only make the congestion worse. And to me, I'm a huge proponent of walkable, bikeable, sustainable communities. And if we require people to commute to Boyle Park, you can't walk as a pedestrian through the golf course that I've discovered many years ago. And so I think to take away a walkable community park is really not the right idea. I live within about 7 minutes from walking to Boyle Park, and especially in the pandemic, if I didn't have Boyle Park to go to with my family, then I would feel like I lost a huge asset. And we've got Sycamore Park has got a flat grassy area that serves that community. Boyle Park is limited, as far as flat grassy areas. And to me, it just seems short-sighted when, as some of the others have mentioned, if the Mill Valley parking lot on Miller is not something that can be developed because of FEMA and the floodplain, then why don't we sell that property and have it zoned mixed use? Maybe there's something, again, an innovative solution there where we've got some live work lofts. There's some mixed use. Maybe that's another member of the community says, well, why does it need to be all large developments for affordable housing? Then maybe that can be, privately, it can be sold, and with the caveat that it has to be affordable housing of some level, not the large ones that Matt and I are familiar with. And I agree that the 35 to 40 makes total sense. And we want to build a community. We don't want to just, have some density of ADUs scattered around as our affordable housing solution. But I would really feel strongly about, let's look at some opportunities. I'm excited about, I can picture what could be on that public safety building, lot number 1 and potentially 2. And I think, some of the things that I'm trying to help with is look at some of our current Mill Valley codes that talk about the height limit of 35 feet. And if in a mixed use development where you wanted to get something that, was just a little bit over that and made it possible to have the 14 feet on the ground level, and then floor to floor 10 feet above that, then you'd be just over that 35 feet. And we could change the height limit and put it on a site that's on that hill where nobody's going to complain. And the back of that hill on Shelter Ridge is other housing that isn't single family homes. So it seems like a perfect place to me. And so anyway, I think we have to listen to the community. Like I said, I'm a member of the community, and I think it's a mistake to consider selling something that helps us to be a sustainable community and gives us a safe, walkable, bikeable place that you will not get if you have to have kids riding their bike and walking along the roadway down past the tennis club to get to Boyle Park. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say for now. And I would like to spend some time working with the subcommittee and Matt to look at some of these ideas for some of these other properties. And, you know, because if we own something and we don't have to buy it, then we're one step ahead.
So Greg, just to clarify, the proposal before us is to bring to council a recommendation for further study, not a recommendation to take action. So it sounds, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're just saying this is a non-starter from you from the get-go and go back to the drawing boards. Is that what you're saying? Or would you entertain, you know, continuing to put more work into the proof of concept that's before us now? And if your view is forget it, this is never going to work, then so be it, you know?
No, my view is in relationship, because we've been focused on a lot about, you know, one particular property being something that's going to fund affordable housing. And I think that's the wrong property to consider, because it's part of our community's assets as a park, community park, not just a neighborhood park, but a community park. So what I'm saying is that we continue this process, but we take that property off the table, because I think that's a mistake to consider selling that one. And I think we ought to look at get into some of the more detail of what I saw in that report is, you know, what could we consider for some of these other, you know, potentially purchasable properties, and how would we fund that in different ways? Because, you know, I had mentioned that earlier, but, you know, fire safety is a huge thing. And, you know, if we keep developing on the hills and putting the large homes that then are on the same roads and they all feed out onto East Blythedale, you know, it's really not a good plan. So I'm not saying let's don't take a plan to city council. I'm saying that we need to listen to the community and remove that those two lots that are on the right at the end of the golf course there, and we need to consider potentially selling the parking lot as an alternative if that's not developable for and affordable for affordable housing, because it would require additional purchase and mitigation to deal with the floodplain there.
Okay, I think I've got that. Okay. Let's see. How about John?
Thanks, Chair McCauley. So I just want to extend my earlier thanks to staff, to the subcommittee for the extensive amount of work you all have done in volunteering your time to prepare tonight's report, because I know it was a tremendous amount of effort. I also want to acknowledge the validity of every single comment that was made tonight. I know that this, you know, some of the measures that have been proposed are very personal and affect people's daily lives. And I just want you to know that that those concerns have been heard. I was encouraged, though, to hear essentially unanimous support and zero opposition to providing more affordable housing in Mill Valley, but also hear that what's being proposed for further study, if ultimately supported by council, and only after further review and study by this committee, would have adverse impacts on the residents of Scott Highlands and disproportionately burden them. So before I make a few more comments, I want to ask a couple more questions. The Pac Bell building at 300 East Blythedale, is that no longer in operation? Because my understanding is that it is. At least I periodically do see vehicles going in and out of there as well as people. Does anybody know if that is the case or not?
It's still being utilized.
Okay. And as far as the public safety building that's been discussed, I'm not sure how much study has gone into that in particular. Was there a proposal? Would the idea there be to carve off a portion of the site, or to redevelop it to either incorporate or relocate the emergency services that are housed there?
No, just to look at the lot area and use the lot area. I think that's a couple of acres to, you know, use that as the site.
So use some of the excess lot area around.
Yeah, and just to be clear, in general, we haven't done a deep dive on anything. right? And Greg, that's true to your comments also. We haven't done a deep dive anywhere. We've done a reasonable level of putting properties through a sieve and seeing what falls out the other side.
Yeah,
Right?
no,
And then,
I would just add, if I could, John, just as a member of the subcommittee. So, I think a couple things. The conclusion of the subcommittee was that of the publicly owned sites that the first question was, could we build on publicly owned sites? And it's the only one that I think is by way of determination of the subcommittee anyway, that's worth talking about. And I think, I think there is a public safety building there. There is a parking lot for Hockey Park. And there's, fairly considerable space behind that that's heavily sloped. So, I think, my own view is that could be part of the further investigation. And I think we would need some sense from the council and, staff that there's an openness to whichever scenario we discuss, right? So one might be to try to build around it, which I'm not sure what the answer on the physical cost or reality constraints of the slope would be. So I don't know the answer to that. I've personally kind of imagined that the real potential in that site is if down the road, the city consolidated services with another city or moved, the space, which I don't have expert or real insight into, but I have some general understanding is something that's been talked about once in a while. So that's just my 2 cents. I feel like that site is the one that could have some potential for development on city-owned someday. And some of the further confirmation of the conclusions of the committee we've discussed, I think this would be the sort of next best candidate to spend, a little time on to get some sense. And maybe either now or down the road, Alan and John or whoever's appropriate could give us more of a sense of which of those scenarios is worth analysis. But John, let me get back to you. I don't want to take your time here.
Okay, thank you. Matt, I also want to go back to a comment you made about the county having dollars for housing, but of course wanting to seek some commitment from Mill Valley, not just in the form of land, but in the form of dollars. And I know you alluded to that the last time we spoke to as well, perhaps even thinking that maybe just land alone could get us there. You've continued to do work on the subcommittee and perhaps refreshed on county housing funding availability, to do a 30 or 40 unit development, and I obviously recognize the economies of scale required to develop and operate an affordable housing project. How much money do you really think that I know you said $3 to $5 million earlier. Is there any chance it could be less than that with land contributed?
So, as you'll recall from your bridge days, it's not exactly a formula, right?
Depends on sites.
I think just in my day-to-day work, I'm in conversation with the county folks. I think they would lean in. It kind of depends, as which other sources you go to try to get of the many state programs, because they have what are called, as leveraging requirements, where once you choose exactly how you're going to build that capital stack, which depends in part on exactly who you want to serve and some other things, as you might get some stiffer requirements. So it can vary a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to predict right now. I think that's a good ballpark. And it can vary as to whether people care if it's just land or land and a little bit of money. It's the way the system works. There's not a simple leverage ratio, but there are requirements depending on, the future work. So I do think it's a good ballpark. And yes, I think, it could be on the lower end of that. There's a lot of variables.
Okay, fully understood. I also want to go back to the concept of a transfer tax. in San Francisco, I think it was adjudicated. Initially, it was thought that you only needed a simple majority to pass it. I don't frankly recall how it settled out. Sounds like, according to somebody who spoke tonight, it ultimately passed. Does anybody know for a fact if it required a supermajority or simple majority? Or if such laws do in California?
Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, that's it.
So as a general matter, the current law is that if you do a real estate transfer tax for a dedicated use, like affordable housing, it requires 2/3. There is a kind of complicated play that the city did in San Francisco that's currently still being litigated. So, it could be that in the future, they tried something, there's a lawsuit, it's working its way up the appeals chain. I don't know the exact level it's at. It could be that, a couple of years down the road, that law changes. It's the first time someone's, they're trying to kind of create a different precedent that hasn't been decided yet in the courts.
Okay.
So I don't think current law has changed, but it could.
Also, I don't know if this is maybe for Danielle or perhaps one of the subcommittee members, but do we have a sense for the approximate cost to confirm the analysis as proposed by staff tonight?
No, I do not. I think we just need to see if the council would be interested in expending the funds. We could go back through the trust fund and then provide a scope of work as well as a cost estimate.
Okay, well, it'd be great to have a sense for what we think that might cost. I'm guessing it's not a big number, but I'd like to know it, and I think it'd be good for us to know before we take action. So I just want to go, so to make a few comments, I just want to go back to one of the comments about ADUs, which is that, so as a member of the Planning Commission, we're seeing about 3 to 5 ADUs a month and approving about that amount. And there's an additional number that are going through the building staff administratively. But I think it's important to keep in mind while they help, provide supply and make a little bit of a dent in affordability, they aren't rent restricted. And the rents on those ADU units, aren't much different than, a studio or a 1-bedroom unit in Mill Valley, which often rent for a few $1,000s. So I think that's just something important for us to keep in mind, that they really aren't per se tackling the affordable housing problem, at the below 60% or 80% of the area median incomes that are generally associated with affordable or low-income housing. The city has a number of revenue-generating mechanisms in place to help create funding for affordable housing, but they're creating a really small amount of dollars right now, and aren't enough to leverage anytime in the near future to build a reasonable amount of affordable housing. Moving on to the green space, the level space within Scott Highlands Park. I think there were some great comments made about the original, creation of the Scott Highlands neighborhood, as it was subdivided. When you look at the programming of parks, there are specific areas of them dedicated to different users. And, obviously the older kids and parents aren't going into the play structure area much. They're using other places. And I think, as Greg also said, flat space is in short supply, and especially in hilly neighborhoods like that. And I think it makes sense that people would have a reasonable expectation to have developed, an appreciation for a space like that. And I do understand the comments about disproportionately affecting one group of people. I have a little bit of a concern about possible legal entanglements here as well if this were to move forward. But I'm not opposed to further study, especially if it's a nominal amount. And there's certainly opportunities for additional public comments. But I do want to say that I'm reluctant to support the selling of that flat space unless it appears to be absolutely necessary to make the difference in either an affordable housing development. But I do also want to point out that with a NOFA, a notice of funding availability, the more funds that you put out there to the affordable housing development community, the more interest you're able to attract, and the more likelihood that they will in turn pursue opportunities, whether it's on public land or private land, in all likelihood in a intelligent place for affordable housing to be developed that's public transit friendly, near amenities, near services, likely on the Blythedale corridor or Miller corridor, or perhaps, Camino Alto or whatnot. So, I think I do want to take a measured process, a measured stance with respect to that. I heard a lot of conflict around, that particular piece of what's being proposed. And I'd like to proceed slowly, making sure that, I understand we're talking about further study, and I am in support of that. But again, I'm reluctant to move on that particular proposal until further study has been done. As far as the parcel across from the Scott Highlands Park, that's part of the golf course that's been proposed. I think I only heard maybe one, perhaps two comments at most about that parcel. And unlike the park, I don't think, there's a reasonable assumption that could or should have been created for people to have assumed that they would have had, been able to continuously enjoy that property for use like a public park. And with respect to emergency access from up Linda Vista, I think it is, we could easily, if people want to access the golf course, for emergency egress, we could create a small easement like a step lane or path like we have throughout Mill Valley to enable people to access the golf course if that was a major concern. So, I am less reluctant about considering the sale of that particular parcel at this time than I am the other parcel. But I also do want to recognize that, I fully understand the process that the subcommittee went through in running, the sites through a sieve essentially, and in trying to winnow them down. And, nobody wants to give up their neighborhood park. And I hope I've made that clear, and that would only be a last resort from where I stand. But at the same time, when I look at, some of the other neighborhoods throughout Mill Valley, I don't see any that perhaps have, as much open space surrounding them. Certainly a golf course, which is yet another open space opportunity. The potential for in the event the flat space went away, for an alternative space to be created nearby. And in addition, there is the park right there in the neighborhood, and then at the kind of the mouth to the entrance to the neighborhood, also Boyle Park. So it seems like I do see how the subcommittee got to the recommendation that it did. So again, thanks to everybody for your efforts, and I'll cease my comments at that point.
Thank you, John. And now let's get to the ever so brief so far tonight, Urban Carmel.
I think John just sort of he set the record right there. I mean, I won't be able to top that. So first of all, thank you, Danielle, for all your hard work and for your commitment to doing this thing. I've known Danielle for many years, having served on the Planning Commission, and she does a fantastic job, and she has once again done it here tonight. I also want to just give a special shout out to John and Matt, who have kind of led this thing together with Danielle and Alan, and put in a lot of volunteer time to get this thing done. I don't think people realize that this is volunteer time that goes into doing all of this work. And, this is the way the public process works. We are bound by law. We cannot gather the people that you see on the screen and discuss these things until you have a public meeting. And so there were a lot of comments to the fact that, well, this doesn't seem like you guys have, thought this thing through all the way and you haven't had enough meetings. Well, that's how this works. we can't do that until we have a publicly noted meeting, and that's this meeting, and you are all part of it, and that's how government functions. And so until we do that, this is the way it works, and it's messy, but that provides the transparency. So comments to the fact that, it hasn't been transparent, actually it's the opposite. This is the transparency. This is how you do the transparency. And as John said, they tried to rush to get it to this point to make it transparent earlier, right? So I just want to clarify that, because I know that's always very confusing. It comes up literally all the time. And that's just, kind of how this whole thing functions. So there have been a lot of, great discussion here. I also, before I just move on, I want to just thank the Highland, Scott Highland people. I know that you are a great community, and I've seen that because I've done a lot of work recently with the golf course community. And I know that you guys bent over backwards to get this path through there, that you've contributed money to make this thing happen. I mean, you guys are really like an outstanding community, and having spent a lot of time on the Planning Commission and previously working on other committees in Mill Valley, that doesn't happen very often. And the ability to compromise just doesn't happen. People don't put their time in the way you guys do and contribute money the way you guys do. It's really kind of a remarkable thing. And I just want you to know, I really listened very carefully to your comments, because I have huge respect for all of you, for everything that you have done. I know that you are a community-oriented part of town, and that you're a very giving part of town. So anyway, thank you for all of your time and for spending so much time with us this evening. So a couple of different things. First of all, I'm super interested in the idea of the public safety building and developing that site. That just seems like a natural area. And I think spending time evaluating that thing further, seeing what the opportunities are there, what we can possibly accomplish there. There were, specific comments from people I highly respect, like Mark Polite and John Palmer, specifically suggesting that we do that. And I like that idea. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's unfortunately, people from Eucalyptus Knoll and from that area aren't here this evening, and they will certainly have something to say. But that area has certainly got great natural potential for it. So I think that makes a lot of sense as a next step to kind of look at that thing and really kind of kick the tires. And Alan, this is something that you are involved in, because there is things going on with the consolidation of of our public safety, and maybe there's opportunities further down the road to develop more of that land. But there is a part of that land that can be developed, it sounds like, sooner. And Matt, it looks like it's a big enough spot to kind of get something going. And so as an initial project to get going, that seems like it's got great potential. As to the sale of city-owned land, right? And city-owned land is land that's owned by everybody in the city. It doesn't belong to a neighborhood just because it happens to be there. It's city-owned, right? We all have an ownership in these things, right? And there are several of them, but there happens to be some really good ones near Scott Highland. But that is nonetheless city-owned property, and there are some other ones. So I think John, in his comments, made a delineation between lot 1 and lot 2, and that was precisely the point I was going to make as well. It doesn't seem like there's much discussion around lot 2. So lot 2 seems like something that we could, as a next step, look at, getting some valuation on, see what it's worth. And I think, with respect to the Highland community, I think, one of the things we might discuss is whether there's an opportunity to divide lot 1. I don't know, it's a pretty big lot, so maybe there's an opportunity to, have our cake and eat it too. So that's another opportunity or another possibility, something we might, consider and talk about. I'm interested in these lots in the spirit of kind of sharing, the pain and the burden and, everything around town about this lot on Cypress and Edgewood and what we can do with that. That's been discussed for many years, those sites up there, and whether there's an opportunity and to, cross them off the list if that's necessary, or pursue them if that's a possibility. And other sites that might also be a possibility. I think we should before we kill the open space in Scott Highland, I think we should try to see what other things are out there to kind of bridge the financing gap on some of these other properties. So I think that's another next step that I see on this thing. Let me make a couple more comments. So I hear Matt and the others talk about the difficulties in doing the tax and coming up with a tax. The fact that there's a high hurdle rate, it's years to take advantage. And it is a difficult thing to pass. I'm very, very skeptical that that's going to be an avenue open to us. But, you know, if John and Mark, who both spoke, you know, have got another idea in terms of, you know, how to raise funding for this thing that they think would work, we're all ears. Like, we want to find a solution to this thing. So by all means, you know, come forward and, you know, suggest to us what we can possibly do. But that seems like that's going to be difficult. Doing donations seems like a great idea. It seems like that's going to work really fast. I spent a decade raising money in this community for an organization. It took the entire time to raise the kind of money that we're talking about. It just takes forever. It just seems like it's a great idea. It seems like everyone's going to give money. And the reality is it takes a long time. People don't give money, you know, as generous as they are. It's just a really, really long road. So I don't think that that's going to be something that's going to be particularly interesting for us to pursue, having been down that before. And it's majorly labor intensive. I mean, if the people that have been on the call tonight want to lead that whole thing and actually take it on, go for it. I mean, it's really time consuming. I mean, I spent 20 hours a week working on that thing for many, many years, trying to raise, you know, a couple $1 million for the library. So it's hard work. ADUs has been brought up as, you know, as a savior for this thing and maybe an complete alternative. And what Matt said is right. You know, they're not family units. They're units for a couple or one person. And I speak from experience because we have an ADU in our house. We have had since we bought our house, and they are fantastic. And I cannot say enough good things about putting an ADU in your house. And, you know, but we have been doing this for years and years and years. This is not like a new idea. When I was on the planning commission, we were approving these things all the time. But, you know, permitted, you get down to 12 per year, right? You see a lot, but the ones that are actually permitted, it's like 12 a year. Now, those are good units, right? I mean, you do that for 10 years, you've created 120 units. That is nothing to sneeze at, but you got to do them year in, year out. And they're for single, you know, they're for single people, they're for couples, they're not for families. We have put in, by the way, all the incentives that you can do for that. We did density bonuses. We have done deed restriction on these things before the state came in and changed the rules. We've done a lot of stuff to try to get those things developed. And big organizations like MVCAN, you know, one of the things that you can do to really try to turbocharge development in Mill Valley is to get members of your, you know, your membership to pursue putting ADUs in their homes. I mean, anybody who's got leverage over a lot of different people that own homes in Mill Valley, by all means, get your membership to participate, because that really provides a lot of housing units over time, and it's flexible housing units. So it's really very attractive. So I think that's something that's really worth pursuing. But, you know, I really think that it's time that we do multi-unit affordable housing development in Mill Valley. It has been 34 years since we did this thing. Pickleweed was the last time we really did multi-unit affordable housing, 100% affordable, not for disabled, not for the elderly, for, you know, working class. And we need that. We no longer have police officers that live in town. We no longer have firefighters that live in town. If you talk to the merchants downtown in Mill Valley, they fear for their very survival in the next 10 years because their workers come from an hour away and then they drive an hour back home. That pollutes a lot, as somebody said on the meeting. It creates traffic. You wonder why we got traffic. 90% of our workers drive in and out of town every day, but it makes our downtown uncompetitive. This is the last place in Marin to get to. You're coming from the north, you're coming from Contra Costa, you driving down to Mill Valley. This is the last place. It's the least desirable place to work. All of those companies have to pay way over minimum wage in order to get workers there. And we will not have a downtown in 10 years' time if we do not create affordable housing. And it needs to start now, and it needs to be on a significant scale. It has to be multi-unit. Otherwise, you won't be able to provide housing for these workers. That's really essential. And if you talk about small town character is our downtown. It's being able to go to the Mill Valley Market and get your loaf of bread and your wine and your vegetables. It's being able to go to these different places and get the things that you want. That's a big part of the fabric of this community. And we need housing in order to do that. And so my bottom line is exactly what Matt said when he made his comments. It's like, if there is a choice to be made between providing a park and providing affordable housing, for changing the lives of maybe 40 families that no longer have to commute 2 hours a day, of providing an opportunity to go to our schools, of providing diversity in our city for the first time in its history. And it's a choice between that and having a park in this neighborhood for 125 families. It's not much of a choice as far as I'm concerned. It is truly the right choice to make affordable housing in this community. That has got to be the thing that we prioritize. It has to be the thing that we do. That really is the thing that matters the most. And that's hopefully what will make Mill Valley not a community that puts a Black Lives Matter sign on their front gate and says, that's it. It's a town that puts a Black Lives Matter sign on their gate and says, I'm ready to do something and to make a sacrifice to really make this thing happen. And I think by the time that we are done, every community around here, every neighborhood around here will have made some commitment to providing housing. And I'll give you a couple examples. My neighborhood is the Old Mill School area, and we had an opportunity to do Old Mill Commons, and we blew it. And that opportunity is gone. And maybe there are other opportunities. There has been another developer that had the opportunity to do housing for teachers on Forest Street. And that's still an opportunity in the future. And that neighborhood will be part of providing housing for Mill Valley. Blythedale, there are properties on Blythedale, privately owned, that are going to be developed probably for apartments. And some of those are going to be affordable. And the communities that are close to that area are going to be providing housing, and it's going to impact their neighborhood. And that's going to be their skin in the game. That's what they're going to do. Miller Avenue, same thing. I was in the meetings, 500 Miller, the big red climbing wall, and the people in the community came out against providing more affordable housing there. And the next time, they're not going to be able to do that because we'll have the ability to do more housing there, and that's going to be their skin in the game. So by the time we are done, there'll be 6 or 7 or 8 different neighborhoods that have all provided some skin in the game to provide affordable housing. And that's the way this works. And by the way, the community that's provided the most in terms of accessory dwelling units on a density basis is Sycamore Park. They can't do apartments in there, and it doesn't belong in there, but that area is very, very dense, and we see a lot of accessory dwelling units going in there on a per foot basis. That's probably the most dense area, and it's been problematic for them. It's difficult because you provide that extra density. So they are providing skin in the game and providing housing in this community. So those are my recommendations on this thing. I think, you know, we have some things that we can look at. We have some low-hanging fruit, I hope. We have some things that we need to evaluate, and we have, you know, some choices to be made. But, you know, that's clearly where I'm leaning in terms of a direction on this thing. Thank you.
Okay, Urban, great. Let me wrap up then. Again, like everyone else, I want to thank Danielle, Mark, and Hannah, who took care of all the logistics. It's really not easy to do this stuff. We're kind of used to it now, but if you thought back to March, we would have thought we'd be able to have a Zoom meeting with 150 people at it and elegantly work our way through it. And thank you to the 64 people who are still listening at this point. That's great. And also thanks to the public. The interaction tonight was very respectful, open, makes me proud to be in the Valley. You know, I mean, I know this is emotional, particularly if you're talking about a piece of land that's very important to you, but I found everyone's comments to be positive and good. It's funny that you, Urban, came with the 34-year thing. I did the same calculation. Yes, 34 years since Pickleweed. We can do math. It's been a long time. I think it's really interesting to have Matt pursue this with Matt, the question of, okay, nothing's happened since and why? And the answer is there's a half dozen organizations who are out doing these kinds of things, all of them mission driven and 501c3, but you know, they're only going to go where they're welcome, right? And what's the most welcoming way to get people to leverage you? It's to come in with some green. I mean, that just makes sense to me, right? So, so we have some hard choices, right? One choice, do nothing. I really don't like that choice. And eventually the overlords at the state will get after us. Again, I said in a heartfelt manner when we started that I'm way more interested in this from the perspective of what it does to our, you know, families, our 40 families in their multi-generational occupation of that land. You know, but I think the do nothing thing, we will lose control of that. We talked about leveraging a lot. Somebody was critical of using fancy words. Let's just make it really clear. Sell property, sell our property, sell our land, which is only here once. That's a hard thing to do. It wasn't our first choice as the subcommittee worked through its sieve, as I call it. And we believe, and it would have been easier to find a lot that was, easier to sell with less emotion attached to it, but none has been found so far. A member of the public made the point that while, the Highland Park community is very concerned about the action that we're considering on the financing side, I want us all to react to the fact that later there will be a 40-unit dense project somewhere in town, maybe on Blythedale, maybe on Miller, maybe on Camino Alto, but there will be significant public reaction to that. It's just the way things are. We've all seen it, having all of us, I guess, most of us been on the planning commissions before. That's just a reality. Multiple neighborhoods will be impacted. I thought John Yolsey did a great job of differentiating between an ADU and what we're talking about here, because ADUs are market rate. Jessica and I busted a bunch of axes trying to make ADUs deed restricted and low income, and we got it right to the finish line, and the state changed the laws on us. We can't do that. I'm very upset by that still. Even 2 years later, when I talk about it, it makes me angry. But nonetheless, we have no source of an ability to bring low-income people into town who are specifically targeted based on their employment in the city, which evidently is allowed by law. So that is a significant opportunity I think we need to continue to think about. What's before us is to go to the council and take what I would call our desk review, all volunteers. I mean, one exceptionally talented and guy knows what he's talking about, Matt, and then the rest of us. What we're asking the council to do is to spend a little bit of money and dig deeper into some of these questions, some of which were brought up tonight that are good, right? There are questions that we have. I've got a few of them linked here. Where are they? Oh yeah, so, is the PSB viable? All right, well, a real estate person can give us some sense of that. And then if we throw land in, how much dollars do we need from the financing side? Would lot number 2, if you will, the golf course side, be enough? Would that get us there? And we could avoid the pain which would come to the Highland neighborhood, because that would be great if that worked, but maybe it's not going to work. We need to know more to know that. I think it's very important to really, if what I like to call, and someone was critical because it was a bad business decision, but sorry, man, we're just getting started here, right? I wanted to get a better sense of a proof of concept. How does this really hang together? Because there's two sides to it, right? One side is, do we have source of funds? Well, we know the only source we found thus far is very painful, right? We know that. And now you go to the other side. Okay, realistically, if we're going to build 40 units, is the city going to tolerate it? Will the council have the courage to say, yes, we're going to put 40 units, at the church on Camino Alto, or the other church further up Camino Alto, or on Mid Miller, or whatever, wherever it ends up. I don't know where it's going to be, but are we going to have the courage for that? Well, to me, you got to have enough of a proof of concept to say, have some professionals come in and say, look, we think these two might be viable, and we've had some preliminary conversations. There seems to be some possibility here. That's when you get the money, right? You don't get the money, throw it into a bank and let it sit there and then say, well, hopefully we can find someplace later. I mean, that makes no sense to me, right? That's kind of like the way the flood district did in Ross Valley. They collected their flood fees and they're still arguing about what to do with them 20 years later. So that's definitely, to me, that linkage is very important. But again, all of it is, we're asking the council to commit to bringing in 2 types of specialists to help get this proof of concept going. One in real estate and one in the area of non-for-profit development. I'm comfortable to make that step forward. Again, John, I was really impressed by what you said. I agree that the last thing we would want to do is, sell that grassy knoll. But if it's the only thing that will make it go, then yes, I would support it. But I'd want to know it's the last thing. So you said that well, and I agree with that. So, and the golf side is easier. And, there might be something we missed. We worked hard, but there might be something we missed in other locations which could do that. Now that's like, oh, let's make people happy and kick the can down the road, and I'm not intending to do that. I just want to continue the momentum and get this going. So based on what we're asking to support tonight, I do support going to council to take the next step, because it's still a step early in the process. And Urban, you are right, to point out to the public why we can't get our acts totally get together, because we legally can't talk unless we're in a notice meeting. So when do you do it? Well, you do it when you at least got the first step. So that's kind of how far we are along in the process. Let's see. I want to see where it takes us. I always say you can't finish a race you don't start. So I'd like to start the race to see whether we can actually get it to finish. And those are my comments. So I think at least we have 4 of us who are supportive of at least bringing this to council. And I'm sure Danielle will do a nice job of summarizing both, Greg's concerns, the public's concerns, kind of where we are on this process, so that we can, frame it properly for council. And then for the people who are still on, as to spokespeople, I'm fine. I'm kind of a fan of a spokesperson if that spokesperson speaks for a group of people, and then we moderate the time so that we can move to deliberations quicker. So that's kind of the deal I would give. So if there are people from CAN who want to be a group, and there are people from from the Highlands who want to be a group, that's the mayor's decision, by the way. So I would encourage them to work with Danielle and figure something out. But that's my thought there. So I think that wraps up our deliberation, unless there are further comments or anybody wants to react to what others have said, because I think you all brought good recommendations. And if there's anything else people would like to say, let's hear it. And if not,
John, I have one thought that I had written down, but then I was wondering if Danielle might be able to let us know how much the 1% redevelopment fee that's part of when they come in that cost a permit. What does that add to the to trust fund? Over.
Danielle, you might remember the numbers, but it's not a lot of money. It's like 150 grand a year or something like that.
Well, that is the money that's in the trust fund right now that we've been talking about, right?
Right, but that's been accumulated over. Sorry to interrupt you. That's been accumulated over multiple years, because we started it before we could, before we found a use for it, and so it's around 150 grand a year. It's going to take you 1 million years to, come up with 5 million.
Well, I guess that was my point, is that, being on the planning commission, we see some pretty significant homes that are often spec homes. And, if it's a 1% fee and it's based on a estimate of construction cost, is anybody really auditing that to look at what the actual construction cost is?
Yeah, they are.
And if you get, what if you get to the point where, you don't want to make it unaffordable to build in Mill Valley, of course, but if it's 1%, if there's that $100,000 mark, but then, and maybe I'm speaking too much like a Democrat, but what happens when it gets over so many $1 million of construction costs? I mean, can it go from 1% to 2% based on the cost of construction? And some very wealthy developers coming in to do a spec home, or someone that, they're doing max FAR homes, and, wouldn't that be nice if we could help leverage that and get a little bit more money? Because I don't know how that cost is approved, but if that's doesn't have to go to the taxpayers, is there a reasonable percentage there that won't cause, a whole, upset with our developer community, which is important to the economy? So I don't know. It's just something to consider. Is it just saying 1% for affordable housing and it's not really giving us a lot of money for affordable housing? Could we consider increasing that depending on the value of the construction?
Yeah, so it's 150 grand a year, and remember, to make this transaction happen, you got to land $5 million in front of a developer, so a not-for-profit developer to tie the land up. So it would take you 10 years to longer. I mean, it doesn't math out. You wouldn't get there, in my opinion. You can check.
I was just curious if if we increase that percentage, whether that would do anything.
Yeah, I guess my sense is you know, if you
Not
got 300,000 versus 100, it's still, that's not going to get you to $5 million. It would take a long time to get there. And by the way, that thing has a sunset in a year, with the idea being, hey, if we haven't found a use for it, because it is a burden on anybody doing any development, right? And if we can't find a use for it, then we should stop it. And in fact, with the COVIA program, if it does well, I think there is now, we can look the public in the eye and say, okay, that money is going to a good use. Because if it's just collecting, you know, its days were numbered. So it's good news that good use was found.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that.
Sure. Yeah. Any other thoughts for anybody? Okay, I've lost my script, Danielle. We just basically ready to call a meeting at this point? Is that how we finish things up?
Well, I think it would be good to make sure we take a vote to make sure that everyone's in favor of recommending that the recommendations potentially of what I did. I think what I'm hearing is drafting a scope of work and a cost estimate would be helpful for everyone to understand the next steps and what's really being further reviewed and evaluated. So then everyone is on the same page. So would that be a next?
Danielle, if I could, just on that, John Yolis, in the prior discussions on the committee, I've personally anyway kind of come to understand that, you know, the purse is really held by the council. So my view is that we can count on the council to provide oversight and coordination with staff to make sure that the expenditure is reasonable. Normally I would want to see that ourselves, but just as far as our kind of role in life, it feels to me like, you know, we're trying to come up with strategies. We're trying to come up with actions. And I believe, and certainly with John and Urban, that, they'll do due diligence on, does the scope make sense? And is this a reasonable cost? So, not, your choice on how you feel about that, but that's just kind of, having been on the committee a little bit, how I got my head around kind of our role here versus council. And so I think if, just in the interest of time, without having to come back to our committee before it goes to the council, maybe that's something that would be comfortable for you.
Since we only meet every couple months, yeah, I hear that. I don't know if either the council members want to respond to that, perhaps.
No, that feels right to me. That feels right to me. I mean, I think this committee is an advisory committee, which is sitting kind of at a theoretical level, as it were, and also we got the planning commission, that's would be involved in anything later. So that feels right to me. Urban, you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. And frankly, I'm not, when I look at the details, so to speak, of what's being proposed in step one, I don't see a whole lot of dollars associated with it, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, step one essentially is proof of concept. Does it move beyond the subcommittee of a couple of volunteers to bringing some professionals in and really beat up the assumptions that were made and see whether we missed anything? And, as you said, that our suggesting with regards to, the park is only if absolutely necessary. And, how's it all penciled? Does the site down by the PSB, how much money is it going to take? Just, get some bones on this thing, right? We're still sitting really conceptually here. So I think that momentum is what is before us. And I guess we could just do a quick poll to say, are we in favor of, Daniel, maybe you can put the description of the item back up on the share screen and we'll just poll everybody.
Hold on, maybe. I'm trying. I closed my pipeline. Here we go. And so, yeah, it might be worthwhile to focus on step one, since that would be the main thing that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're proposing step two. You got to do step one before you do step two, right? So I think what's before us is to recommend step one to council, and maybe we'll give everyone a minute to read it. I can see Urban's eyeballs. and that was forwarded.
And I think one thing we would be adding is a scope of work just in cost. So everyone being the community as well as city council and the committee is clear on the scope.
Yeah, I don't know whether you can get that done by Monday. Maybe you can, depending on Matt and my availability to reach agreement with you as a subcommittee, but I'd be cool with that if Matt is. Did you hear that, Matt? Yeah. Matt's thumbed up. Okay, are we ready to take a vote? Okay, you want to, Danielle, you want to call the vote?
Sure. Do I start in a certain order?
Can I, John, can I ask just one question as far as step one goes? Is that
Sure.
Is that also, rather than just evaluating sites that can be potentially sold, is it also evaluating sites that are potential sites for affordable housing?
Well, yeah, we can do that. I can tell you that we looked at that pretty hard, and because of the lot size, of anything, I'm reasonably comfortable that we've dialed it down, that that's really the only one. But sure, yeah, you can add that. Not, sure.
Okay. So with that, Greg, do you want to start?
I support moving forward with the study, with the understanding of all the things that the community's brought up. And again, I'd really like to get some energy towards identifying some sites in conjunction with how to pay for it.
Matt?
Yes, I'm for the motion.
Urban?
Aye.
John, sorry, this is not something I do every day.
Aye, and I do think at the last meeting, we did see a number of privately owned sites that were available for affordable housing development. So hopefully that will get us on our way, along with one or two of the sites that have been provided tonight.
And John, Chair McCauley.
Yeah, I'm in favor of, essentially doing the homework to move this through a proof of concept, essentially.
Great.
All right, well, I think we're unanimous. So I'm looking forward to Danielle, getting that scope of work tight so that Matt and I can take a quick look at it before it goes before council. And of course, Urban will weigh it, at council, and you will be well briefed based on what happened tonight. Although you and I can't talk before the council meeting because of Brown Act, but yeah, so I think we're ready to go. I don't think we have anything else left on the agenda from the housekeeping perspective. Can we just call the meeting there, Danielle?
Yes, so the meeting is adjourned at 11:10. Thank you again for all the public, your comments, and they will be shared with City Council.
All right. Talk to you all soon.
Great.
Thank you
for your time tonight.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.